Here is the analyzed and rewritten content. I have changed the character names to fit a Western setting more naturally. Caroline is now Emily. Janet is Brenda. Leia is Chloe. Etc. And removed the timestamp set. I have also smoothed out the call to action CTA. I removed the jarring intro CTA and inserted the requested, more natural sentiment near the 2/3 mark of the story, just before the protagonist decides to take action. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled our small dining room. It was a smell I had worked all day to create. Outside, snow fell in thick, silent blankets, covering the world in white. Inside, the lights on the Christmas tree blinked, casting soft colors on the walls. It was supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be peaceful. My name is Emily. I'm 26 years old. And for the past year, I had been the sole provider for this household. I paid for the roof over our heads, the food on our plates, and the festive decorations that made the room feel warm. I carried the turkey from the kitchen, its skin a perfect golden brown, and set it down in the center of the table, steam rising from it like a prayer. My mother, Brenda, sat at the head of the table. My younger sister, Chloe, and our aunt were there too. They watched as my mother picked up the carving knife. She sliced into the turkey, the knife making a soft tearing sound. She placed a piece on her plate, then another. She took a bite, chewed slowly, and then looked directly at me. Her eyes were flat, devoid of any of the Christmas warmth that filled the room. "You need to move out," she announced. The words dropped into the silence between the clinking of forks and the soft Christmas music playing from a small speaker in the corner. She said it as easily as if she were asking me to pass the salt. There was no anger in her voice, just a simple, cold statement. Aunt Sarah froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Chloe stared down at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at my mother. I looked at the turkey I had spent hours preparing. I thought of the rent payment that had cleared from my bank account just last week. I thought of the electric bill, the Wi-Fi bill, and the groceries I had bought just 2 days ago for this very meal. A strange calm settled over me. There was no room for shouting. The time for that had long passed. I put my fork down gently on my plate. "Really?" I replied, my voice even. "I pay the rent, the bills, and the groceries." My mother just shrugged and took another bite of turkey. She didn't have to say anything else. Her silence was the answer. In her eyes, I wasn't her daughter who had saved her from foreclosure. I was just an inconvenience that had served its purpose. It all started with a phone call just over a year ago. I was living in a small but comfortable one-bedroom apartment downtown. I loved my place. It was my sanctuary, the first space that was truly mine. I had decorated it with secondhand furniture I'd found and refurbished myself. It was filled with plants and books, and it was quiet. I worked in IT for a mid-sized company, a job that was demanding but rewarding. I had my own life, my own friends, and my own future, all neatly planned out, I was happy. Then the phone rang. It was my mother, and she was crying. It wasn't the soft, sad crying I was used to. It was the ragged, panicked sobbing of someone who had hit rock bottom. "They're going to take the house. Emily," she choked out between sobs. "I got the final notice today." My heart sank. My mother had been laid off from her administrative job 6 months prior. She had assured me she had savings, that she would be fine, that she was already interviewing for new positions. I had offered to help then, but she had waved me off with a proud smile. "I'm your mother," she'd said. "I take care of myself." It turned out that was a lie. The savings were gone. The interviews had dried up, and the bank was done waiting. The house was the one my sister Chloe and I had grown up in. It held every memory of our childhood, the pencil marks on the doorframe tracking our height, the worn patch of carpet where we played board games, the faint smell of my father's aftershave that still lingered in his old closet years after he had passed away. The thought of a foreclosure sign being hammered into the front lawn made me feel sick. "I'll help." "Mom," I said without a second thought. "Don't worry. We'll figure it out." Figuring it out meant me. I went over that weekend with a folder for her bills on my laptop. We sat at the same kitchen table where she would one day banish me. The pile of red-stamped envelopes was bigger than I had imagined. She was 3 months behind on the mortgage, and the utility companies were threatening to shut everything off. The solution was simple, but it was brutal. I couldn't afford my own rent and her mortgage. So, I made a choice. I would give up my sanctuary to save hers. "I'll move back in," I told her. "I'll break my lease. I can cover the mortgage and the bills with what I save on rent. It'll just be for a little while until you get back on your feet." Tears streamed down her face again, but this time they were tears of relief. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Oh, Emily," she whispered. "You're saving me. You're my hero." For the first few weeks, it felt like I paid the backed mortgage to stop the foreclosure. I set up automatic payments for the utilities from my bank account. The rent was $1,200 a month. The electricity and gas averaged around $150. The internet she couldn't live without was another $80. The family phone plan, which included her and Chloe, was $120. I took over the weekly grocery shopping, which was never less than $200. I even kept the Netflix account active because she said her shows were the only thing that helped her relax. The numbers added up quickly, eating away more than half of my monthly salary. But it felt right. It felt like what a daughter was supposed to do. In the first month, my mother was full of promises. "I'll pay you back every penny as soon as I get a job," she'd say, rubbing my shoulder while I cooked dinner for us after a long day at my own job. By the second month, the promises faded. She stopped talking about her job search. Her days were spent watching television or having coffee with friends. When I'd gently ask if she'd had any luck with applications, she'd sigh dramatically. "It's impossible for someone my age. Emily, you wouldn't understand." By the third month, my role in the house had solidified. I was no longer the hero daughter who was helping out. I was the engine that made the household run, and my only function was to provide money. The exploitation was silent, but it was constant. It started with small things. "Could you pick up that new face cream for me? The expensive kind?" she'd ask while I was making the grocery list. "You're doing so well. It's not a big deal for you." Then it grew. She started inviting her friends over for dinner parties. She would plan the menu and the guest list, and I would be expected to shop for the ingredients and cook the meal. I'd come home exhausted from work to find a house full of people. My mother playing the gracious host, accepting compliments for a meal she hadn't touched until it was on her plate. My friends would invite me out and I'd have to decline, making excuses about being tired, when the truth was, I couldn't afford a $15 cocktail after buying a week's worth of groceries for 3 people. Chloe was no help. She was younger, still in college, and saw our mother through rose-colored glasses. "Mom's just having a hard time," she'd say when I tried to confide in her. "You need to be more patient." So, I was patient. I was quiet. I continued to pay for everything, telling myself it was temporary. I worked extra hours, taking on freelance IT projects on weekends to build back my depleted savings. I was running on fumes, living in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the floral wallpaper I had hated since I was 13. My life was no longer my own. I was just a walking, breathing bank account. And the thanks I got was silence, the assumption that I would just keep providing forever without a single word of gratitude. I thought that was the worst it could get. I didn't realize the silence was just the foundation for something much uglier. The gratitude didn't just disappear. It curdled into resentment. My presence in the house, the very thing that kept it standing, slowly became the source of all my mother's problems. It was a gradual shift, a slow poisoning of the air I was paying for. It started with little complaints, passive-aggressive jabs that were small enough to ignore. "The coffee you buy is so bitter," she'd say in the morning, pouring herself a cup of the coffee I had paid for. "I prefer the other brand." I would make a mental note and buy the other brand next time. It didn't matter. The next week, that brand would be wrong, too. Soon, the complaints escalated from preferences to accusations. My job required a strong, stable internet connection. I worked from home 2 days a week, and sometimes I had to log in at night to handle server issues. One evening, my mother was in the living room trying to stream her favorite period drama. The show started buffering. "Emily," she yelled from the couch. "The internet is slow again. What are you doing in there?" I walked out of my room. "I'm not doing anything. Mom, it's probably just the provider. Sometimes the signal slows down in the evening." She pointed an accusing finger at my closed bedroom door. "It was never this slow before you moved in with all your work computers and gadgets. You're using it all up." I tried to explain how bandwidth works, that my laptop being on wasn't using up the internet. She just waved her hand dismissively. "I don't understand all that technical nonsense." I just know I can't even watch my show in peace. For the rest of the night, she sighed loudly every time the show buffered a theatrical sound designed to make me feel guilty. The next day, I called the internet provider and upgraded to a more expensive plan. A $100 installation fee and $30 extra dollars a month coming directly from my account. My mother didn't thank me. She just said, "Well, it's about time." The blame became a daily routine. If the dishwasher wasn't emptied the second it finished its cycle, it was my fault. I would come home from a 10-hour shift, drop my bag by the door, and see the clean light blinking. My mother would be on the phone in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, looking right at the machine. "Oh, you're home," she'd say. "I was just waiting for you to empty that. My back is acting up today." Her back was always fine when she wanted to go to the mall with her friends. The worst was the way she weaponized my job against me. My work required me to be on call 1 week a month. One afternoon, while I was on call, a critical server went down. My work phone rang a special ringtone I used for emergencies. I answered it immediately and walked to my room for privacy. I was on the phone for nearly an hour, talking my colleagues through a complex reboot sequence. My voice was low but focused. The moment I hung up and opened my door, my mother was standing there, her arms crossed. Her face was a mask of fury. "Do you have any idea how disrespectful you are?" she hissed. "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. I was trying to take a nap and all I could hear was you in there talking and talking. "Some of us have to rest. You have no consideration for anyone else in this house." "Mom, that was a work emergency. I have to take those calls. It's my job. The job that pays for this house." The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. It was the first time I had ever explicitly thrown the financial arrangement in her face. Her expression hardened. "Don't you dare throw that in my face," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I am your mother. This is my house. You are living here under my roof. The least you can do is show a little respect." The logic was so twisted it made my head spin. I was paying for the roof, but it was still her roof. I was the adult, the provider, but I was being treated like a rebellious teenager. I retreated into my room and shut the door, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and despair. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pack my bags right then and leave her with the mountain of bills she so conveniently ignored. But I didn't. I just sat on my bed and cried silently. I called my sister Chloe, hoping for some support. "She's just stressed, Emily," Chloe said, her voice distant. She was away at college, shielded from the daily reality of the house. "You know how she gets. Just try not to upset her." Try not to upset her. The words echoed in my head. I was the one working myself to the bone. I was the one sacrificing my own happiness. I was the one being blamed for every minor inconvenience. But I was the one who was supposed to be careful not to upset her. It was in that moment that I realized I wasn't just a bank account anymore. I was a scapegoat. I was a sponge designed to absorb all of her unhappiness, her failures, and her rage. And I was becoming saturated. The Christmas dinner was the end. Hearing my mother say, "You need to move out," wasn't a shock. Not really. It was just the final, ugly confirmation of everything I had been feeling for months. It was the moment the subtext became text. After I replied, "Really? I pay the rent, the bills, and the groceries." A thick, suffocating silence fell over the table. Aunt Sarah stared at my mother with wide eyes. Chloe was pushing her mashed potatoes around her plate, creating little swirls. Her focus so intense, you would think it was the most important task in the world. My mother simply picked up her wine glass and took a long, slow sip, her gaze fixed on me over the rim. It was a look of pure dismissal. I didn't exist. My contribution didn't exist. I pushed my chair back from the table. The sound of the wood scraping against the floor was loud in the quiet room. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't say I needed air or that I felt unwell. I just excused myself from the table, from the meal I had cooked, from the family that was consuming me whole. I walked to my bedroom and closed the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. I had learned long ago that loud displays of anger were pointless. They only ever gave my mother ammunition to call me hysterical or dramatic. Silence was the only defense she couldn't twist. I sat on the edge of my bed, the floral wallpaper seeming to close in on me. I didn't cry. The tears were gone, burned away by months of quiet resentment. All I felt was a profound and chilling emptiness. For a year, I had told myself a story. I was helping my family. I was doing the right thing. I was being a good daughter. That story shattered in the space of a single sentence. I wasn't helping. I was being used. And my use had apparently run out. A cold resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach. She wanted me to move out. Fine. I would. But I wouldn't do it on her terms. There would be no shouting match. No dramatic scene where I listed my grievances while she rolled her eyes. There would be no begging for her to see my side of things. I was done trying to be seen. I stood up and pulled my large suitcase from the back of the closet. It was dusty. I hadn't used it since before I moved back home. I wiped the dust off with the sleeve of my sweater and laid it open on my bed. The decision was made. I was leaving. Not in a week. Not after a fight. I was leaving tonight. My movements were slow and deliberate. I packed methodically, a strange sense of calm washing over me. First, the most important thing, my work laptop and all its chargers. It was my lifeline, my key to independence. Then, my professional clothes, the blouses and slacks I needed for the office. I folded them neatly. Then my casual clothes, jeans, sweaters, t-shirts. I didn't pack everything. I didn't have the energy to sort through my entire life. I packed only the essentials, enough to get me through the next week. I left the sentimental things behind, the old photographs on my dresser, the worn teddy bear from my childhood, the books I had loved. They belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. A girl who believed in the unconditional love of a mother. To pack them would feel like a lie. As I packed, I replayed the scene at the dinner table. The way my sister refused to look at me. The way my mother dismissed my entire contribution with a sip of wine. There was no misunderstanding. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a deliberate, calculated act of cruelty delivered in front of an audience to maximize my humiliation. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted me to know I was worthless to her beyond my wallet. I stopped packing for a moment and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady. I opened my banking app. The numbers on the screen grounded me. My checking account was lower than I liked, depleted by the Christmas gifts I had bought for everyone and the feast currently sitting on the dining room table. But my savings account, the one I had been secretly feeding with every freelance gig I could find, was healthy. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. It was enough for a deposit on a new apartment. It was enough for a motel room in the meantime. It was enough to escape. The money I had worked so hard for, the money my mother saw as her right, was about to buy my freedom. I found a website for an extended stay motel on the other side of town. I booked a room for 1 week, paying for it with my credit card. The confirmation email appeared in my inbox almost instantly. It was real. I had a place to go. I zipped the suitcase. It was heavy. I placed it by the door, ready to go. I looked around the room one last time. It wasn't my home. It was just a room. A place I had been staying. I knew what I had to do. I would wait until she was asleep, probably passed out from the wine she'd been drinking all afternoon. Then I would walk out of that house, and I would not look back. There would be no note on the kitchen counter. No dramatic, tearful goodbye. My exit would be as quiet and as invisible as she had made me feel. I waited in my room for hours. I could hear the faint sounds of the television from the living room, punctuated by my mother's occasional laughter. They were carrying on as if nothing had happened, as if a bomb hadn't just been dropped in the middle of our family. The thought that they could so easily ignore the cruelty, so quickly resume their holiday, was more painful than the words themselves. It proved how little I mattered. Around midnight, the house finally fell silent. I sat on my bed, listening to the sounds of it settling, the groan of the pipes, the hum of the refrigerator. I waited another hour just to be sure. I didn't want a confrontation in the hallway. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of another fight. My departure had to be on my terms, quiet, clean, and final. At 1:00 in the morning, I decided it was time. I put on my coat, my hands moving with a calm precision that felt foreign. I picked up my purse and my laptop bag, slinging them over my shoulder. My large suitcase was the final piece. I took a deep breath and opened my bedroom door, wincing at the small click of the latch. The hallway was dark. A single light from the Christmas tree in the living room cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. I moved slowly, my feet silent on the old wooden floor. Every step was deliberate. A step away from the life that was suffocating me and towards something unknown. When I reached the living room, I paused. The tree was beautiful, covered in ornaments we had collected over the years. "That'll make you feel better. You should really drink that, Elena." Chloe chimed in, her voice thin. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at the glass, her fork pushing a stray green bean around her plate. This was my moment. My performance had to be flawless. I picked up the glass, my hand steady. I brought it to my lips, feeling the chill of the condensation. I looked at my mother over the rim. Holding her gaze, I tilted the glass, letting the liquid touch my tongue. It was just cranberry juice. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the deadbolt. It was the loudest sound in the world, the heavy chunk of the lock sliding back. I held my breath, listening for any sound from my mother's bedroom down the hall. Nothing. She was asleep, lost in a wine-fueled slumber, completely unaware that her financial support system was walking out the door. I slipped outside, closing the door gently behind me until it clicked shut. The cold December air hit my face, sharp and clean. It felt like the first real breath I had taken in a year. Snow was still falling, and the world was muffled and peaceful. I dragged my suitcase down the unshoveled walkway, the wheels leaving a single track in the fresh powder. My car was parked on the street. I threw my suitcase in the back seat and got behind the wheel. For a moment, I just sat there, the engine off, looking at the house. The Christmas lights glowed. It looked like a perfect family home from a holiday movie. It was a beautiful lie. I started the car, the engine rumbling to life, and I drove away without looking back. The drive to the motel was a blur. The streets were empty. When I checked in, the man at the front desk looked exhausted. He slid a keycard across the counter without making eye contact. The room was sterile and impersonal. It smelled of disinfectant and old cigarette smoke. There was a queen-sized bed with a cheap brown bedspread, a small desk, and a television bolted to the wall. It was grim and lonely, but it was safe. It was mine. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The adrenaline that had been coursing through me began to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I didn't bother to unpack. I just took off my coat and my shoes and crawled under the covers, still in my clothes from Christmas dinner. The next few days were a strange limbo. I expected my phone to explode. I braced myself for a barrage of angry text messages from my mother demanding to know where I was. I anticipated a confused call from Chloe asking what was going on. I even thought my aunt might reach out. But my phone remained silent. The first day, the silence was a relief. It was peace. I slept for 10 hours straight. When I woke up, I ordered a pizza to my room and watched meaningless television. I didn't have to cook for anyone. I didn't have to clean up after anyone. I didn't have to listen to anyone's complaints. The second day, the silence began to feel strange. I went to a nearby coffee shop with my laptop and worked for a few hours, trying to create some semblance of a routine. I kept my phone on the table next to me, checking it every few minutes. Still nothing. Had they not noticed I was gone? My car was missing? My suitcase was gone. Half my clothes were gone. How could they not notice? By the third day, the silence was no longer peaceful. It was a weapon. It was a statement. My absence was not an emergency. It wasn't even an inconvenience. The silence told me everything I needed to know. My mother hadn't just kicked me out. She had erased me. She hadn't called to scream at me. She hadn't called to see if I was safe. She hadn't even called to ask where she could send the bills. That was the deepest betrayal of all. It wasn't the insult at the dinner table. It was the crushing, absolute indifference that followed. It was the realization that I could disappear from their lives. And the only thing they might eventually miss was the money that would stop appearing in their bank account. I was not a daughter. I was a transaction that had been completed. The hollow ache in my chest was immense. But beneath it, something new was beginning to grow. Not anger, but a hard, cold clarity. I was truly, completely on my own. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. For a full week, I lived in the strange, sterile peace of the motel room. The silence from my family was a constant hum in the background of my new life. During the day, I went to work, performing my duties with a focus that surprised me. It was a relief to have problems I could actually solve: a server that needed rebooting, a code that needed debugging. At night, I returned to my anonymous room and searched for apartments online. I was creating a new life for myself. One small, logical step at a time. The quiet was still unsettling, but I was beginning to accept it. I thought their indifference was the final word. I was wrong. It was only the opening act. Exactly 8 days after I left, my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. My heart leaped for a second, a stupid, reflexive flicker of hope. Maybe she was checking on me. Maybe she was worried. Chloe, are you okay? Where are you? I typed back immediately, a wave of relief washing over me. I'm okay. I'm at a motel for now, looking for an apartment. I'm safe. The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared and disappeared several times. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Finally, her message came through. Chloe, you won't believe what Mom is telling people. The relief I'd felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a familiar sinking dread. What is she telling them? Chloe? Chloe, she's telling everyone you had a screaming fit on Christmas. That you threw your plate on the floor and stormed out because you didn't like your presents. She's saying you abandoned her, left her with all the bills, and that she has no idea where you are. She's been crying on the phone to Aunt Linda and Grandma for days. I had to read the message 3 times before the words fully registered. A screaming fit? Through my plate? It was such a wild, theatrical lie that it was almost laughable. But I knew my mother. I knew her ability to weave a tale of victimhood. She was a master storyteller, and I was always cast as the villain. I felt a cold fury rise in me so intense it made my hands shake. I had left quietly to avoid this exact kind of drama. And she had created it anyway, manufacturing it out of thin air. Me, Chloe. You were there. You know that's not what happened. Chloe, I know. But she's so convincing. Everyone feels so sorry for her. Her response was a weak defense. The words of someone who didn't want to get involved. She knew the truth. But she wasn't going to fight for it. I was on my own. The proof of my mother's campaign came 2 days later. I was in my car about to head to an apartment viewing when my phone rang. It was my Aunt Linda, my mother's older sister. I almost answered with a cheerful hello, but a warning bell went off in my head. Emily, she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. I have been calling and calling you. This was a lie. It was the first time she had called. Your mother is beside herself with worry. Is she? I asked, my voice flat. How could you do that to her? Aunt Linda's voice rose, cracking with practiced emotion. On Christmas, of all days. To just walk out? Leave her completely alone with no money? No support? She told me you screamed at her. That you said you hated her. Emily, she is your mother. She loves you. Every word was a twisting knife. My mother had not only lied, but she had used the most potent poison available to her, the idea of the poor, abandoned mother, a sacred figure in our family. Aunt Linda, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That is not what happened. Oh. So your mother is a liar now? She snapped. I know you've been under a lot of stress, dear, but this is a new low. You need to call your mother and apologize. You have broken her heart. I wanted to scream the truth at her. I wanted to list every bill I had paid, every sacrifice I had made. I wanted to tell her that her sister hadn't paid a single cent for her own home in over a year. But I knew it would be useless. The story was already set. My mother was the victim. And I was the ungrateful, monstrous child. I have to go, I said, my throat tight. You call your mother. Emily, you fix this, she ordered, and then she hung up. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, the echo of her words ringing in my ears. You fix this. I had been fixing things my whole life. Fixing my mother's finances, fixing her moods, fixing the broken things around the house. Now I was expected to fix a lie that was designed to destroy me. Over the next few days, the fallout continued. My grandmother left me a tearful voicemail begging me to be a better daughter. My cousin Tyler, who I'd always been close to, sent me a one-line text, "What is wrong with you?" I was being systematically cut out of my own family, excommunicated based on a lie. The isolation was suffocating. I felt like a ghost, watching as a fictional version of myself was being tried and convicted in a court I had no access to. My mother was brilliant. She knew that the quiet, responsible one is never as compelling as the hysterical, ungrateful one. Her story was dramatic. Her story made her the center of attention. My story, the quiet, painful truth of financial statements and emotional neglect, was boring. It was just a series of spreadsheets and receipts. In the war of narratives, I was losing. For days, I was paralyzed by a sense of helpless rage. I would sit in my motel room at night, scrolling through my family's social media pages. I saw pictures of my mother with her friends, her expression carefully crafted to look brave and sorrowful. The captions were full of vague references to family challenges and difficult times. The comments were a flood of sympathy. "Stay strong, Brenda. We're all here for you. You're such a wonderful mother. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Each comment was a small validation of her lie. Another nail in the coffin of my reputation. My first instinct was to fight fire with fire. I composed a dozen angry text messages, my thumbs flying across the screen, detailing every dollar I had spent, every insult I had swallowed. I wrote furious emails to Aunt Linda and my grandmother, attaching scanned copies of bank statements and utility bills as proof. I imagined calling my mother and unleashing a year's worth of suppressed anger, screaming until my throat was raw. But I never sent any of them. Each time my finger would hover over the send button, I would stop. I could hear my mother's voice in my head, turning my anger against me. "See," she would say to everyone, "I told you she was unstable. I told you she was hysterical." My rage, no matter how justified, would only serve as evidence for her case against me. She had set a trap, and lashing out was exactly how she expected me to get caught in it. I realized I couldn't win by playing her game. Drama was her territory. She was the queen of it. My only weapon was the one thing she never bothered to use, the plain, unvarnished truth. So, I decided to tell it not with anger or insults, but with the quiet, undeniable weight of facts. If this story touches you, please subscribe and share the video to help me develop further. One evening, after a particularly draining day of apartment hunting, I sat down at the small motel desk, opened my laptop, and navigated to my social media page. My profile was private, but I had dozens of family members as friends. I knew that whatever I wrote would spread through them like wildfire. My hands trembled as I clicked Create Post. I took a deep breath, pushing down the anger and the hurt, forcing myself to be objective. I had to write this like a report, not an emotional plea. I started typing, deleting, and retyping, carefully choosing each word. I would not call my mother a liar. I would not call her a narcissist. I would not describe the pain she had caused me. I would simply lay out the timeline, the facts, and the finances, and let them speak for themselves. After an hour, I had the final version. It was short, clear, and impossible to misinterpret. To my friends and family, It began. There seems to be a lot of confusion about my current situation, so I feel I need to clarify a few things. About a year ago, my mother was in danger of losing her home. To prevent foreclosure, I gave up my apartment and moved back in. Since that time, I have been the sole person responsible for all household expenses. This includes the monthly mortgage, the electricity, gas, internet, and phone bills, as well as all groceries and other household necessities. I did this willingly to help my family. On Christmas Day, I cooked dinner for the family. During the meal, my mother informed me that I needed to move out. There was no argument. I did not yell or cause a scene. I respected her wishes and left the house quietly later that night to avoid any confrontation. I am safe and am in the process of finding a new place to live. I wish everyone the best. That was it. No emotion. No accusations. Just a simple sequence of events. The most powerful part, I knew, was the part about the finances. It was the one thing my mother couldn't deny because the bank statements existed. It was the truth that underpinned everything. My heart was pounding as my cursor hovered over the post button. This was an irreversible step. It was a declaration of war. In a way, I was drawing a line in the sand, not just between my mother and me. A line had been drawn around the entire family, and I was asking them to choose a side. For a moment, fear washed over me. What if no one believed me? What if this just made things worse? But then I thought of her, sitting in the house I paid for, crying on the phone and painting me as a monster. And I thought of myself hiding in a motel room, silenced by her lies. My anger returned. But this time it was different. It was a cold, clarifying anger. It gave me strength. I clicked the button. The post went live. I closed my laptop immediately, my hands shaking too much to even look at it. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot lights. I had no idea what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. I had taken my story back. After I made the post, I turned off my phone. I couldn't bear to watch the reactions trickle in, to see the arguments that might erupt in the comments. I made a cup of tea from the cheap tea bags provided by the motel and sat in the quiet of my room. I had launched my one and only missile, a flare of truth into the thick fog of my mother's lies. Now all I could do was wait. I managed to sleep. A fitful, dream-filled sleep. When I woke up the next morning, my stomach was in knots. With a sense of dread and determination, I turned my phone back on. It vibrated for nearly a full minute. A relentless series of buzzes as a backlog of notifications flooded in. My screen lit up with dozens of alerts from my social media app. My heart pounded against my ribs. I took a deep breath and opened it. The post had exploded. There were over 100 reactions and nearly 50 comments. But it was the private messages that I saw first. The previews on my lock screen were a chaotic mix. The first message I opened was from my cousin Tyler. I braced myself for another accusation. But his words were different. Tyler, Emily, I am so sorry. I knew something was wrong. Your mom called me too, telling me that crazy story. And it just didn't sound like you. But I didn't want to get in the middle of it. I feel like a coward. What she's done to you isn't right. We all knew she was taking advantage of you. We didn't say anything. If you need anything at all, a place to stay, money, anything, just tell me. I'm on your side. Tears pricked my eyes as I read his message. It was the first time in over a year that someone in my family had acknowledged what was really happening. It was validation. A simple confirmation that I wasn't crazy. He saw it. He knew. The next message was from Aunt Linda. Her tone was completely different from the angry, accusatory phone call a few days prior. Aunt Linda, Emily, dear, I saw your post. I feel absolutely terrible. Your mother told me a very different story, and I am ashamed that I believed her without talking to you first. Of course. You wouldn't behave that way. It was wrong of me to call you and say those things. Please forgive me. Your mother has a way of twisting things. You know. I hope you are okay. Her apology felt a little weak, a little self-serving, but it was an apology nonetheless. She was backpedaling, trying to get on the right side of the story now that the facts were out. It wasn't perfect, but it was a crack in the wall of lies my mother had built. I scrolled through the comments on the post itself. The family was clearly divided. Some of my mother's friends had left comments defending her. There are two sides to every story. One wrote, "You shouldn't air your family's dirty laundry in public. Emily, it's disrespectful." Another added, but they were drowned out by the messages of support. Distant cousins and old family friends were chiming in. I can't believe she did that to you after you saved her house. Emily, you've always been the most responsible one. We believe you. Good for you for speaking the truth. The most important comment came from my father's sister, my Aunt Patricia, who had always kept a polite distance from my mother. Aunt Patricia, Emily, your father would be so proud of the strong, independent woman you've become. You did the right thing by him in taking care of your mother. And you're doing the right thing by yourself in leaving. Call me. The silence I had been carrying for years wasn't just mine. It was a family secret everyone had agreed to keep. They all knew my mother's character. Her flair for the dramatic. Her tendency to see herself as a perpetual victim. They had enabled it for years with their silence. My post hadn't told them anything they didn't already know. It had simply made it impossible for them to continue pretending. Then I saw a text from Chloe. Chloe, Mom saw your post. She is losing her mind. She's calling everyone, screaming and crying that you're lying to turn the family against her. Why did you have to do that? You just made everything worse. Her message was a splash of cold water. She was still trapped. Still trying to manage my mother's emotions. Still seeing my act of self-preservation as an attack. I felt a pang of pity for her. She wasn't ready to see the truth yet. I texted her back a simple reply. Me. I didn't do this to hurt her. I did it to stop her from hurting me. I put my phone down. The storm of notifications still buzzing. A civil war had started within my family. Sides were being chosen and loyalties were being tested. It was messy and painful, but it was also liberating. The truth was out. I was no longer a lone voice screaming into the void. Others were finally listening. The silence was broken, and I could finally begin to breathe. In the weeks that followed, I found my footing. The support from my family, though fractured, gave me the strength I needed. Aunt Patricia co-signed a lease for me, allowing me to secure a small but sunny studio apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Cousin Tyler helped me move the few belongings I had from a storage unit. For the first time since leaving my old life behind, I had a home. It was a place that was truly mine. A space where no one could blame me for a slow internet connection or demand that I fix problems I didn't create. The peace was intoxicating. I started building a new routine. I bought my own groceries. Whatever brand of coffee I wanted. I spent my weekends reading in the park or exploring my new neighborhood, not running errands for someone else. I was slowly, carefully rebuilding a life from the ground up. A life that revolved around my own needs and my own happiness. I had heard through the family grapevine that my mother was in a state of chaos. With my financial support gone, the bills had started to pile up again. The narrative she had so carefully constructed had crumbled, leaving her exposed and furious. She had tried to get money from Aunt Linda, who had refused for the first time in her life. My mother was isolated, and she was panicking. I knew a confrontation was inevitable. I just didn't know when it would come. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work, changed into comfortable clothes, and was about to make dinner when there was a knock at my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was my mother. She was standing in the hallway holding a grocery store apple pie in a plastic container. Raindrops glistened in her hair. She had a hesitant, sad smile on her face, the one she always used when she wanted something. I opened the door but stood in the doorway, blocking her entrance. "Emily," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "I had a feeling this was your building. I thought I'd come see your new place. I brought pie." She held it up as if it were an olive branch, a magical pastry that could erase the last few months of pain and deceit. She was acting as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't told me to move out, as if she hadn't slandered my name to our entire family. She was here to pretend, to smooth things over so that her life could go back to being comfortable. "Hello? Mom," I said. My voice was calm, steady. I was surprised at my own lack of emotion. The rage and the hurt had burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. "Well, aren't you going to invite me in?" she asked, her smile faltering slightly as I didn't move. "It's wet out here." I stepped outside into the hallway with her, pulling the door closed behind me. I would not let her into my sanctuary. This conversation would happen on neutral ground. "Did you come to apologize?" I asked. The question was direct, simple, with no room for misinterpretation. I wasn't going to engage in small talk. I wasn't going to talk about the pie or the rain or my new apartment. I was cutting straight to the heart of the matter. This was her one and only chance. Her face changed. The soft, sad smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of indignation. She was genuinely offended that I would ask such a thing. "Well, I don't think I need to," she said, her tone becoming defensive. "We both made mistakes. Emily, you were very disrespectful with that post you made. It was very hurtful. We both made mistakes." There it was. The refusal to take any responsibility. The twisting of reality to make herself a victim once more. In her mind, my act of telling the truth was just as bad, if not worse, than her act of exploiting me and then throwing me away. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw a woman who was so trapped in her own narratives that she couldn't see the reality in front of her. I had hoped for an apology, for a moment of remorse, for a sign that the mother I once loved was still in there somewhere. But she was gone. Maybe she was never there at all. I felt a profound sense of release. I was finally completely free. I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't need her to understand. I just needed her to be gone. I didn't say another word. I didn't argue or defend myself. I simply turned around, walked back into my apartment, and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly, the click of the latch echoing in the hallway. It was the sound of a final boundary being set. It was the sound of the end. I leaned my back against the closed door and let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for a year. Through the peephole, I watched her stand there for a moment, her face a mixture of shock and fury. Then she turned, set the pie on the floor in front of my door, and walked away. I left the pie where it was. I live in my small studio apartment now. The morning sun streams through the big window and wakes me up. I make coffee for one, and it's always the brand I like. The silence in my home is no longer the heavy, weaponized silence of my mother's house. It's a peaceful silence, a quiet that I have chosen and cultivated. It's the sound of freedom. I meet Chloe for coffee every other week. She's still living at home, still caught in the web of our mother's moods and manipulations. But something in her has changed. She asks me questions about my budget, about how I found my apartment, about what it's like to be on my own. I see a spark of her own desire for freedom in her eyes. She's getting worse. Chloe told me last week, stirring her latte. Now that you're not there to be the bad guy, she's starting to find little things I do wrong. You'll know when you're ready to leave, I told her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. And I'll be here for you when you are. I'll help you pack. She gave me a small, grateful smile. For the first time, we feel like sisters, like allies, not just two people trying to survive the same storm. Sometimes I think about that Christmas night. I think about the shock, the humiliation, the profound sense of betrayal. For a while, I thought the betrayal was the public lie she told about me. Then I thought it was her showing up at my door with a cheap pie and no apology. But I know now what the real betrayal was. It was that moment at the dinner table when my own mother looked at me and decided I was disposable. She threw me away like a piece of trash, not with anger, but with a casual, chilling indifference. That was the moment my old life ended, and my new one began. My post didn't destroy our family. It just revealed what was already broken. Now I finally live for myself. My money is my own. My time is my own. My peace is my own. And it is more valuable than anything I lost. If you've ever had family twist the truth against you, leave a comment and share your story. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This community listens. They taught me that blood doesn't make a family. Loyalty does. Respect does. Safety does. They showed me that the ties that bind are not forged in a shared history, but in a shared trust. I don't hate them. Hate is still a rope, a connection that pulls you back toward the pain. I feel nothing at all. They are simply ghosts. Hazy figures from a past life that no longer belongs to me. They didn't just try to steal my money. They tried to steal my will, my agency, my very self. They failed. I am still here. And in the silent, peaceful rooms of the house they will never see, I am finally, completely, and irrevocably free. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video to help me grow and improve.